They thought burning down my family's 80-year-old cabin resort would break me until I walked into that emergency HOA meeting with a manila folder that made their president's face go ghost white. Picture this, 30 a.m., flames shooting 30 FT into the sky. My grandfather's tools melting in a shed that housed 3 generations of memories. The acrid stench of burning propane mixed with my wife's tears as she watched our livelihood turn to ash. Our HOA president, Delilah Thornfield, showed up at dawn with her morning coffee, actually smiling at the destruction. Fast forward 6 months, same woman, packed community center, TV cameras rolling. Me walking down that center aisle with a manila folder that contained $847,000 worth of evidence. When I opened it and started reading those bank records out loud, her $1,000,000 smile cracked like cheap paint. See? They made one crucial mistake. They got so drunk on their own power, so confident in their little corruption scheme, that they forgot I'm the kind of guy who doesn't just get mad. I get methodical. What was in that folder? A financial paper trail so damning it sent 3 people to prison and sparked the biggest HOA corruption investigation in state history. Before we dive in, drop a comment. What would you do if your HOA literally burned down your livelihood? And let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this HOA nightmare epidemic has spread. My name's Rex Hartwell, and 3 months ago, I thought the biggest problem in my life was whether to replace the dock planks this spring or wait until fall. Funny how fast everything can go to hell when you're just trying to mind your own business. Pine Haven Cabin Resort sits on 40 acres of prime lakefront property in the mountains of North Carolina. My grandfather built the first cabin in 1943 with nothing but a handsaw, determination, and the kind of stubborn pride that runs in our family like a genetic condition. Rustic cabins now dot the shoreline, each one weathered to that perfect silver gray that screams authentic mountain experience to city folks looking for a taste of the simple life. My wife Sarah runs the office with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the warmth of fresh-baked cookies. Our 16-year-old twin boys, Jake and Luke, spend summers maintaining trails and teaching city kids how to bait a hook without impaling themselves. We're not getting rich, hell. Some years we barely break even, but we're feeding 3 generations of families who've been coming here since their grandparents were young. Then came 2019, and with it, Thornfield Estates. The developer promised luxury mountain living that respects the natural environment. What we got was a gated community of 8,000 SQFT McMansions, each one more pretentious than the last. Worse, the developer lawyers created a mandatory HOA that somehow, and I'm still not sure how this was legal, covered both the new development and our existing resort. Welcome to American property law, where your rights evaporate faster than morning mist. The HOA fees hit us like a sledgehammer. Residents paid $400 a month. We paid $2,800 as a commercial property. The promise: preserve the rustic character while ensuring property values for all stakeholders. Pretty. Words that meant absolutely nothing, as I'd soon discover. Enter Delilah Thornfield, HOA president and the human embodiment of everything wrong with petty authority. Years old, corporate attorney from Phoenix, married to Morton, a retired bank executive who looked like he'd sucked the joy out of a children's birthday party. She drove a white Tesla, wore designer everything, and had the kind of smile that could freeze antifreeze. There. House, picture a glass and steel monument to excess, complete with a lawn so perfectly manicured it looked like AstroTurf. Not a single tree left standing on their property. They'd bulldozed everything for unobstructed mountain views, because nothing says mountain living like destroying the actual mountains. The first shot across our bow came in spring of 2023. A certified letter with the HOA letterhead, delivered with all the warmth of a tax audit notice. Aesthetic compliance violation, it read, followed by 3 pages of demands that made my blood pressure spike. fresh stain on all 12 cabins, $15,000 new community appropriate signage, $8,000 landscaping improvements to match neighborhood standards, $12,000. Total damage, $35,000 we didn't have with a 60-day deadline that might as well have been 60 minutes. I drove over to Delilah's fortress to discuss a reasonable timeline. The smell of fresh mulch from her obsessively maintained flower bed mixed with the chemical tang of lawn treatments as I rang her doorbell. When she answered, her Chanel perfume hit me like a wall of expensive aggression. "Mrs. Thornfield, I'd like to discuss the compliance notice. We're willing to make improvements." "But we need time to Mr. Hartwell." Her voice could have flash-frozen a lake. "We're not running a charity here. Your property affects our property values. Compliance is non-negotiable." The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked back to my truck, already. Knowing this woman wasn't interested in reasonable solutions, she wanted submission, and that's something the Hartwell family has never been good at providing. By August, I'd managed to scrape together enough cash to stain 4 of the 12 cabins. The smell of fresh cedar stain mixed with lake water should have been satisfying. Instead, it felt like feeding coins into a rigged slot machine. I called the HOA office, hoping my good faith effort would buy me time for the remaining 8. Jenny, the management company secretary, sounded genuinely apologetic. "I'll pass along your request to the board, Mr. Hartwell. I'm sure they'll be reasonable about an extension." Poor Jenny. She had no idea she was working for sociopaths. 3 days later, the certified mail arrived like a legal hand grenade. Not only were they rejecting my extension request, but they'd somehow discovered a whole buffet of new violations that made my head spin. The dock that had been there since 1965 suddenly extended. 3 FT beyond permitted waterline. Our gravel parking area, where families had been parking for decades now, lacked proper drainage permits. Yes, even our evening campfire pit, where kids roasted marshmallows under the stars, somehow violated open flame ordinances. The daily fines started at $500 per violation. With 4 active violations, we were hemorrhaging. $1,100 every single day. Sarah found me at the kitchen table at midnight, calculator in hand, watching our life savings evaporate in real time. $1,000 a month. More than most people make in a year. That's when I remembered something my grandfather used to say. When someone's trying to steal your land, the first thing you do is check who really owns it. Smart man, even if he never went to law school. I spent the next week in the courthouse basement digging through records that probably hadn't been touched since Carter was president. The elderly clerk, bless her heart, helped me navigate filing systems that looked like they'd been organized by someone with a serious grudge against alphabetical order. But what I found made me laugh out loud. Probably the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. Our resort predated every single zoning ordinance by 30 years. We had what lawyers call legal non-conforming status. Basically grandfather. Protection that's stronger than Superman's cape. I'd learned about this years ago when a buddy dealt with similar issues over his auto shop. The dock, parking area, and fire pit were all protected under county law. Every single fine they were charging us was about as legally valid as monopoly money. Fired off a certified letter to their attorney with copies of the relevant statutes demanding immediate cessation of all invalid fines. For 24 hours, I actually thought I'd won. Then my phone rang. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Delilah Thornfield." Her voice carried the kind of fake sweetness that probably gave her dental work cavities. "While your historical research is interesting, we've had to implement new safety protocols for everyone's protection." The new emergency rule passed at a special meeting. I conveniently wasn't notified about required all commercial properties to carry $2 million in liability insurance. Our current policy covered $500,000 industry standard for small resorts recommended by every agent I'd ever talked to. The quotes I received for the increased coverage made my chest tight, $18,000 additional per year. "Surely you understand," Delilah continued, her voice dripping with manufactured concern, that public safety transcends sentimental attachments to outdated business models. Right there, listening to her casual dismissal of 80 years of family history as sentimental attachment, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about aesthetics or safety. This was about money, specifically about forcing us to spend so much money that we'd have no choice but to sell to whoever was waiting in the wings. But they'd pick the wrong family to play financial chicken with. I reached out to our longtime guests through Facebook, creating a Save Pinehaven group that exploded to 800 members in 2 weeks. Families who had been coming here for generations started sharing stories, photos, memories that made my eyes water. The local newspaper picked up the story with a headline. That made me grin. Family business under siege by HOA overreach. The community support felt like warm sunshine after months of storm clouds. But even as people rallied around us, I could practically hear Delilah's stilettos clicking as she paced her marble floors, plotting her next move. And trust me, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The insurance victory lasted exactly 12 days before Delilah struck back with the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. I'd found a loophole through our agent and umbrella policy that boosted our liability coverage to $2 million for $4,800 a year instead of $18,000. When I walked into that September board meeting with the certificate in hand, watching Delilah's perfectly composed mask slip for just a second, I felt like David landing his first stone on Goliath's forehead. "Well," she said, her voice tight enough to snap guitar strings. "It's wonderful to see compliance with our safety requirements." But her eyes promised war. Labor Day weekend brought families from 3 states to our annual barbecue and talent show, a tradition that started when my grandfather needed a way to keep kids entertained during a rainy week in 1952. The smell of hickory smoke and the sound of children's laughter should have made it perfect. Instead, I watched a stranger with a clipboard prowling around our property like a health inspector at a gas station hot dog stand. "Property assessment," he announced when I approached, not bothering to look up from his notes. "Board-authorized inspection for compliance verification." I'd bet my last dollar this guy had never seen the inside of a building code book, but he was thorough as cancer. Violations magically appeared over 3 days. A loose handrail on cabin 7, a minor electrical issue in the office that our electrician said was actually up to code. Fire extinguishers 2 months past their inspection dates. Even the rope swing the kids had been using for decades suddenly became a liability hazard, requiring immediate removal. What really burned my ass was watching him interrupt families' vacations. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been bringing her grandkids here for 15 years, had to move her car 3 times because it was blocking emergency access routes that had never existed before that weekend. "This is harassment," I told the inspector after he cited us for having inadequate signage on a bathroom that was clearly marked and had been in the same spot since the Carter administration. He just shrugged. "I don't make the rules, buddy. I just enforce them." But here's the thing about pushing a man too far. Eventually, he stops retreating and starts hunting. I called my paralegal friend, Jenny Blackwood, a woman who could find loopholes. In the 10 Commandments if you gave her enough coffee and motivation. For $500, she agreed to dissect our HOA's governing documents with the precision of a forensic pathologist. What she found over the next week made me understand why Delilah was so confident in her little power games. The original CCNRs, that's. The constitution of any HOA required a majority vote of all property owners for any rule changes affecting commercial properties. But the emergency insurance rule had been passed with only 12 of 47 residents present, all of them from Thornfield Estates. "They can't just railroad you with a stacked meeting," Jenny explained, her finger tracing the relevant clause. "This is basic corporate governance. You've got grounds to challenge every rule they've passed in the last year." I'd learned about these voting requirements years back when my brother dealt with his condo association trying to ban his motorcycle. Seemed like every property owner in America eventually gets an education in HOA law, usually the hard way. Meanwhile, the local TV station caught wind of our story. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Rita Gonzalez, interviewed 3 generations of the Morrison family, who'd been coming here since the 1960s. This place is like a time capsule, Old Frank, Morrison told the camera, his weathered hands gesturing toward the lake. My kids learned to swim in that water. My grandkids caught their first fish off that dock. Now some lawyer from Phoenix wants to turn it into condos because it doesn't match her marble countertops. When they asked Delilah for comment, she declined an on-camera interview. Morton, her husband, gave them a tour no comment that made him look guilty of something, though I wasn't sure what yet. Social media exploded. Save Pine Haven started trending locally, with photos of family memories spanning decades. The support felt overwhelming and humbling at the same time. But I was learning that every victory came with a price. When I presented the board with our legal challenge to their voting procedures, demanding a proper recount on the insurance rule, Delilah's response came swift and vicious. Property inspections doubled. Code enforcement officers started showing up weekly. Even our propane supplier got a mysterious call questioning our safety record and suggesting they might want to reconsider their contract. Sarah found me in the office one night staring at a stack of violation notices that looked like a small phone book. "Maybe we should consider selling," she said quietly. The developer called again. His offer went up to $800,000. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, my grandfather shaking hands with our first guest in 1943, both of them grinning like they'd just struck gold, which, in a way, they had. "No," I said. "They want us gone? They're going to have to try a lot harder than this." October 15th, 2:30 a.m. I'll remember that timestamp for the rest of my life, burned into my memory like the flames that woke me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Sarah shook me awake, her voice cutting through my dreams like a fire alarm. "Rex, wake up. Something's burning." The orange glow through our bedroom window told me everything I needed to know before my feet hit the floor. Our maintenance shed, 80. Years of tools, memories, and irreplaceable family equipment was going up like a Viking funeral pyre. The acrid smell of burning propane mixed with melting plastic, and something else I couldn't identify, but made my stomach clench. I called 911 while pulling on boots and jeans, but by the time the volunteer fire department arrived, the shed was a total loss. 3 separate burn patterns, the fire chief noted grimly, which meant one thing: arson. What happened next still makes my blood boil. At 6:45 a.m., barely 4 hours after the fire, I arrived at the smoldering ruins to meet the insurance investigator. And there, standing beside the smoking wreckage with a steaming coffee cup and wearing designer jogging clothes, was Delilah Thornfield. Mourning constitutional, she explained with a smile that belonged in a shark documentary. Terrible tragedy, though I have to say that old shed was quite an eyesore. Perhaps this is blessing in disguise opportunity for more attractive storage solutions. Morton appeared 5 minutes later with a camera, claiming he was documenting the damage for HOA insurance purposes. When the fire chief asked why they were present before the property owner had even been officially notified, Morton's face went redder than a sunburned tourist. The insurance investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Carol who'd clearly seen every kind of fraud imaginable, raised an eyebrow at their convenient presence. Interesting timing for a morning jog, considering this isn't your usual route. I spent the next week playing detective, and what I found made my grandfather's stories about fighting claim jumpers in the old days seem quaint. Security footage from the marina next door showed a figure in dark clothing climbing our fence at 2:15 a.m. The build looked suspiciously like Morton, though the face was obscured by a hood. Then the anonymous envelope appeared on my office desk. No postmark, no return address, just photos of Morton at Brennan's Hardware the day before the fire, purchasing 3 5-gallon gas cans. The receipt was still attached, his credit card signature clear as daylight. The note inside was brief. Some of us are disgusted by what they're doing. A neighbor. I realized we had allies inside Thornfield Estates. People who were watching this corruption unfold and finally getting sick enough to act. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against bullies is their own neighbor's conscience. But proving. Arson and getting insurance money were two different battles. Our policy would cover the $25,000 shed replacement, but only after receiving an HOA compliance certificate. Guess who refused to sign it? Given the fire's suspicious circumstances, Delilah announced at the next board meeting, we have concerns about the property management practices that may have contributed to this unfortunate incident. She was holding our insurance money hostage until we completed every single compliance demand. We couldn't rebuild without insurance, couldn't get insurance without compliance, and couldn't afford compliance without the insurance money. It was a perfect financial trap, and she knew it. The emergency board meeting she called 2 days later felt like watching a kangaroo court in session. New rule: all commercial properties must install $40,000 sprinkler systems within 60 days. The kicker: recent incidents had voided all grandfathering exemptions. Public safety, she declared, with the authority of someone who'd never fought a real fire in her life, transcends sentimental attachments to outdated properties. That night, Sarah and I sat in our kitchen, calculator between us like a chessboard in a losing game. The numbers were brutal. Sprinkler system, compliance improvements, legal fees, lost revenue from reduced bookings. We were looking at financial ruin no matter which direction we turned. The developer's offer is still on the table, Sarah said quietly. $800,000 would cover our debts, give us something to start over with. I stared at my grandfather's photo on the refrigerator, him teaching my father to fish at the same dock they were trying to destroy. 3 generations of Hartwells had fought to keep this place alive. Weather, economic downturns, changing vacation trends, family emergencies. We'd survived it all, but we'd never faced an enemy this calculated, this willing to destroy everything we'd built, just to add a few zeros to their property values. No, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. They want a war. They'll get one. But I'm done playing defense. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Jenny, asking her to request every financial document the HOA had generated in 4 years. The second was to the county sheriff, reporting suspected arson with photographic evidence. If Delilah wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn that some of us had been practicing a lot longer than she had. Days later, armed with North Carolina's public records, Law and Jenny's legal expertise, I walked into the management company's office like a man with a search warrant. The receptionist's nervous smile told me everything I needed to know about how unusual these requests were. "We'll need a few days to compile everything," she stammered, clearly hoping I'd give up and go away. "State law says 72 hours maximum, Jenny," replied smoothly, sliding the official request across the desk. "We'll be back Friday at noon. What we hauled out of there in 4 bankers' boxes would have made Al Capone's accountant blush." I spread the documents across my kitchen table like a jigsaw puzzle from hell, and the picture that emerged made my blood run cold. Over the past 4 years, our HOA had collected $2.1 million from all property owners. The reserve fund money set aside for emergencies and major repairs should have contained at least $800,000. The actual balance, $23,000, that meant someone had made $1. $3 million disappear into thin air. I'd learned about reserve fund requirements during my brother's condo board fight. Most states mandate these accounts specifically to prevent HOAs from going broke when the roof needs replacement or the roads need repaving. But this wasn't mismanagement. This was systematic theft. The money trail led through a maze of inflated contracts and phantom expenses that would have impressed a mob accountant. Delilah's nephew in Phoenix ran the management company that charged us $8,000 a month for landscaping services any honest contractor would provide for $3,000. Snow removal costs hit $15,000 per season for work that required 2 people but somehow employed 3 full-time crews. But the personal enrichment scheme made my jaw drop. Delilah's home landscaping assessment had been paid by HOA funds $75,000 for what looked like something stolen from a country club. Morton's driveway snow removal equipment, a $35,000 plow truck that somehow qualified as a community expense. Board members had attended HOA conferences at luxury resorts in Hawaii and the Bahamas, billing $28,000 in educational expenses over 2 years. Every invoice, every receipt, every fraudulent expense had been rubber-stamped by a board that treated our community's money like their personal ATM. Then I found the nuclear bomb buried in their management contracts, a clause I'd never seen before. Gave the HOA power to force property sales if any owner created ongoing financial burdens for the association. Properties unable to pay accumulated fines could be seized and sold to recover costs. The enforcement mechanism was already in place, just waiting for the right moment. Morton owned something called Mountain Properties LLC. 3 guesses who was positioned to buy Pine Haven Resort for pennies on the dollar once they'd manufactured enough financial burden to justify seizure. The timeline was all there in black and white. Drive Rex out by spring, acquire the property for $600,000 through their shell company, demolish everything for luxury condos. 100 new HOA units meant nearly $1 million in additional annual dues revenue. I wasn't their first target. I was just the first domino. 3 other pre-existing properties had already received similar harassment campaigns. The auto repair shop, the antique store, the small fishing guide service. All of them owned prime real estate that could be improved with luxury development. Jenny's face went pale as we connected the dots. Rex, this isn't just HOA abuse. This is organized fraud, possibly racketeering. These people could go to prison. That night, I sat in my grandfather's old chair, staring at the lake where 3 generations of kids had learned to swim. The moonlight on the water looked the same as it had 80 years ago, but everything else had changed. We weren't just fighting for our resort anymore. We were fighting for our entire community's soul. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood the game they were playing. And once you know the rules, you can figure out how to win. They'd made one crucial mistake in their perfect crime. They'd gotten so greedy, so confident in their little corruption scheme that they documented everything, every fraudulent expense, every inflated contract, every step of their property grab conspiracy was sitting in those boxes, signed and dated like a confession. Delilah thought she was playing chess with a country bumpkin who'd fold under pressure. She was about to learn that some of us play a much longer game than she realized. The next morning, I called a war council. Jenny arrived first, her paralegal. Training evident in the color-coded file folders she carried like ammunition. Marcus followed our CPA guest for 20 years, who'd built a forensic accounting practice that had taken down 3 embezzling CFOs. Rita Gonzalez, the retired investigative reporter who'd covered our story, brought decades of experience exposing corruption. Even Sheriff Deputy Tom Bradley showed up on his day off, explaining that some things are bigger than jurisdictional boundaries. We spread everything across the resort's conference room like generals planning D-Day. "This is beautiful work," Marcus said, studying the financial documents with the appreciation of an artist viewing a masterpiece. They documented everything. Every fraudulent transaction, every kickback, every personal expense. It's like they wanted to get caught. Rita was already on her laptop, cross-referencing names and companies. I've seen this pattern before in municipal corruption cases. They create a web of shell companies, inflate every contract, and skim from multiple revenue streams. The arrogance is always their downfall. But Jenny had identified our real weapon, the annual budget meeting. December 31st, she explained, pointing to the HOA bylaws. Every property owner gets to vote on next year's budget and board positions. Thornfield Homes, plus 12 other properties, including yours. You need 30 votes to control everything, fire the management company, recall the board, and elect honest leadership. I'd learned this lesson watching my uncle fight his neighborhood association years ago. Most people skip these meetings, which is exactly how crooks take control. But when property owners actually show up and vote, the math changes fast. Marcus ran the numbers while Rita worked her media contacts. Each property owner has been overcharged an average of $8,000 over 4 years due to the inflated contracts. When people realize they can get refunds plus lower dues, you'll have all the votes you need. The strategy crystallized. Expose the corruption publicly before the meeting. Rally every property owner to attend. Then take control through legitimate democratic process. Clean, legal, and absolutely devastating to their scheme. Rita's phone buzzed with a text that made her grin. Channel 9's investigative unit wants to do a feature story. They're calling it HOA Corruption, a statewide epidemic. Your case will be the centerpiece, airing the week before your budget meeting. We spent the afternoon rehearsing my interview, focusing on specific dollar amounts and clear timelines. No emotion, just facts. Rita had covered enough corruption scandals to know that righteous anger plays well, but cold facts destroy defenses. Meanwhile, our anonymous allies inside Thornfield Estates were feeding us intelligence that would have made the CIA proud. Bored. Meeting recordings, private conversations, even email screenshots showing the conspiracy in their own words. The smoking gun recording made my hands shake. Morton caught on tape saying, "Once we own that resort, we're sitting on a $2 million gold mine. These hillbillies don't understand property values. It's almost charity work, really." Delilah's voice followed. "The Pine Haven acquisition is just the beginning. We'll force out every pre-existing property and rebuild this entire area properly. Mountain living for people who actually deserve it." That last phrase hit me like a physical blow. People who actually deserve it. As if my grandfather, who'd fought in World War II and built this place with his bare hands, somehow deserved less than a Phoenix lawyer who'd bought her way into our community. But their arrogance was becoming our ammunition. Tom Bradley reviewed our evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd built a lot of court cases. Criminal charges for embezzlement are slam dunks. Civil recovery will get your money back faster. File both simultaneously. The pressure will make them fold like lawn chairs. The community organizing felt like something out of a political campaign. Pizza nights for property owners, where I presented the financial evidence in charts simple enough for a fifth grader to understand. Carpool lists to ensure maximum turnout at the budget meeting. Even a voting guide for the new board candidates we'd recruited. I'd watched this strategy work during my neighbor's successful fight against a corrupt school board. When honest people organize and show up, crooks lose every time. The venue battle proved crucial. Delilah wanted the meeting in their small clubhouse capacity, 20 people. I demanded the community center, citing state law requiring adequate accommodation for all eligible voters. When she tried to refuse, Jenny threatened immediate legal action. "Public meetings must be actually public," Jenny explained to the panicking board. "Try to exclude voters and you'll face federal civil rights violations on top of your other problems." Sarah found me in the office late one night, surrounded by evidence boxes and presentation materials. "You look different," she said, confident again. She was right. For months, I'd been playing defense, reacting to their attacks, always one step behind. Now I was setting the agenda. The hunter instead of the hunted. December 15th, I told her. Everything changes December 15th. November brought Delilah's desperation like a cold front, moving in from hell. Anonymous flyers started appearing in Thornfield mailboxes overnight, printed on expensive paper that screamed professional hit job. The headlines made my stomach churn. Resort owner under investigation for tax evasion, photos of our fire damage. Accompanied misleading captions about negligent fire hazards endangering families. Fake quotes from concerned former guests described declining standards and unsafe conditions. Rita's investigative instincts kicked in immediately. She traced the printing to Murphy's coffee shop downtown, where security footage showed Morton making copies at 11 p. M looking around nervously like a teenager buying condoms. Amateur hour, Rita muttered, reviewing the footage. These people watch too many movies and not enough court TV. But the smear campaign was just the opening move. The developer appeared at my door personally 3 days later, offering a handshake and a smile that probably cost him $50,000 in dental work. He'd driven up in a BMW that cost more than most people's houses, wearing a suit that screamed, "I eat small businesses for breakfast. Rex Hartwell. I'm David Morrison with Mountain Vista Development. I have a proposition that might interest you." His improved offer hit like a financial sledgehammer. $50,000 cash with all HOA fines and legal issues mysteriously disappearing upon sale. The timing was too convenient, the solution too perfect. I recorded the entire conversation legally. North Carolina's one-party consent law had become my best friend. "There's been an arrangement with the current board," he admitted when I pressed for details about the disappearing legal problems. "Sometimes these neighborhood disputes can be resolved through mutually beneficial solutions." "Thanks," I replied, my voice steady as granite, "but I'm not for sale at any price." His smile cracked like cheap paint. "That's unfortunate. I hope you reconsider before circumstances become more challenging." Circumstances became challenging within the week. Our internet service went down when excavation equipment accidentally cut the fiber optic line twice. Phone lines got severed so often that Verizon started joking about installing armored cables. The health inspector showed up based on anonymous complaints that turned out to be completely fabricated. He found nothing but admitted someone had been very insistent about shutting us down. The trail cameras I'd installed after the arson caught Morton's pickup truck near our property at 2 a.m. headlights off, creeping along the fence line like a coyote looking for chicken coops. Then came the legal intimidation that showed me just how scared they'd become. Their attorney's cease and desist letter arrived via certified mail, demanding I stop my campaign of harassment against respected community leaders. They threatened a $100,000 defamation lawsuit if I continued spreading libelous accusations and stalking board members. Jenny's response was a work of art. A preview of our evidence portfolio that made their lawyer go so quiet you could hear his billable hours ticking. We never heard from him again. The social media war escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. Fake Facebook profiles popped up overnight, attacking everything from my military service to Sarah's background as an outsider gold digger. Someone posted photos of our boys with captions questioning my parenting skills. When the attacks targeted my family directly, something primal and dangerous woke up inside me. You can threaten my business, my property, even my reputation, but come after my wife and children, and you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Our Hands Save Pine Haven supporters fought back hard, exposing the fake profiles and tracing IP addresses back to Thornfield Estates. The internet lynch mob turned on its creators faster than a rabid dog. But the financial pressure campaign nearly broke us. The HOA suddenly demanded immediate payment of all accumulated fines, $127,000. Lien preparation notices went to our bank, threatening our credit line. Our insurance company received anonymous tips about safety violations that required 2 separate inspections to debunk. Even our propane supplier mysteriously canceled our contract, citing reliability concerns. I realized this was coordinated warfare designed to force operational shutdown before the budget meeting. They were trying to kill us with 1,000 cuts, hoping we'd bleed out before we could expose them. The community counter-response surprised everyone, including me. Rita's 3-part newspaper series launched like journalistic carpet bombing, HOA corruption, the Pine Haven War. Part 1 exposed the financial mismanagement. Part 2 detailed the harassment campaign. Part 3 connected everything to the arson investigation and pending criminal referral. Social media exploded. The story got shared 2,000 times locally, then picked up by regional outlets. Suddenly, our little David versus Goliath fight was becoming a symbol of HOA abuse nationwide. The anonymous ally network inside Thornfield Estates was feeding us intelligence that painted a picture of an organization eating itself alive. Board members were pressuring residents to vote against us, threatening their own violation campaigns if they showed support. Some neighbors were being told that supporting the resort would tank their property values, but people were getting sick of the threats. 3 more residents contacted us secretly, offering to testify about the intimidation tactics. Then came Thanksgiving week and the attack that nearly shattered my resolve. Our main water line mysteriously broke, flooding the office building and destroying computers, guest records, and irreplaceable family photographs. The repair crew found clean pipe cuts tool marks that told the story of deliberate sabotage. I stood in ankle-deep water, watching 80 years of memories dissolving into muddy soup, and felt something break inside me that had nothing to do with water pipes. Sarah found me there at midnight, salvaging what I could from the wreckage. "They're not going to stop," she whispered, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "They'll keep attacking until we're destroyed." I looked at a waterlogged photo of my grandfather teaching my father to fish, the image barely recognizable, but the memory still crystal clear. "No," I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. "They just made their biggest mistake. They've shown me exactly what kind of people they really are." Sarah's hand found mine in the cold water. Time to show them what kind of man I am. December 10th hit like a media avalanche that buried Delilah's perfect little world under an avalanche of truth. Channel 9's investigative unit aired HOA corruption exposed during prime time with our story as the devastating centerpiece of a statewide epidemic. The reporter had done her homework interviewing financial experts who called our case textbook racketeering and legal scholars who termed it the most brazen HOA fraud they'd ever documented. When they knocked on Delilah's door for comment, she hid behind her curtains like a vampire avoiding sunlight. Morton's no comment lasted exactly 3 seconds before he slammed the door so hard it rattled windows 2 houses down. The story went viral overnight. HOA corruption started trending nationally, with our little mountain drama becoming a symbol of neighborhood tyranny everywhere. But media attention brought something I'd never expected. Justice resources. The district attorney announced a criminal investigation the next morning, citing overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud. The state attorney general opened a parallel civil investigation into management company practices across North Carolina. Even the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit requested copies of our documentation. My local fight had accidentally become a statewide corruption case, bringing legal firepower I could never have afforded alone. Delilah's response was pure panic disguised as procedure. An emergency board meeting was called to cancel the December 15th budget meeting, claiming security concerns due to media circus. But Jenny had anticipated this move, filing a court injunction before Delilah finished typing the notice. "Annual budget meetings are legally required," the judge ruled curtly. "The defendant will proceed as scheduled with appropriate sheriff security if necessary." Watching Delilah's face when the bailiff delivered that ruling was worth every sleepless night I'd endured. Morton's desperation reached criminal stupidity 2 days later. Our security cameras caught him loading boxes of financial records into a commercial shredding truck behind the management company office. Rita's photographer happened to be staking out the building. Sometimes luck and preparation create their own miracles. Sheriff deputies intercepted the truck before it reached the shredding facility, recovering evidence that included handwritten notes about eliminating paper trails and Phoenix backup plan. Morton earned himself obstruction of justice charges on top of everything else. The community mobilization felt like watching democracy in action. 100 people planned to attend our budget meeting in a venue that seated 200. Media confirmed attendance from 3 states. The governor's office sent an observer due to statewide implications. I organized shuttle service from town parking just to accommodate the crowd. Even Thornfield Estates residents were turning against their leadership. The anonymous recordings our allies provided painted a picture of board members in complete meltdown discussing bankruptcy declarations and asset transfers to offshore accounts. One recording made my blood freeze. Delilah strategizing about fleeing to Morton's vacation home in Costa Rica if things go south at the meeting. I shared that intelligence with law enforcement immediately. Flight risk was a real concern now. The personal attacks reached fever pitch in the final week. Someone hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my military service, contacting old Army buddies fishing for negative stories. Sarah's workplace received harassing calls. Anonymous CPS reports claimed I was an unfit parent due to financial instability. When they filed a fake child welfare report against my family, something primitive and dangerous awakened inside me. You can attack my business, my reputation, even my property, but threaten my children's welfare with false accusations, and you've crossed into territory where civilized rules no longer apply. The CPS investigator closed the case within 24 hours, noting it was clearly malicious and without merit, but the damage was done. My boys had to endure questions at school about whether their father was really a criminal. That night, Jake asked me, quietly, "Dad, are we going to lose everything?" I sat on his bed, looking at this kid who'd grown up thinking adults were basically fair and reasonable, watching that innocence crumble in real time. "No, son, but we're going to learn something important about fighting for what's right, even when it's hard." Luke chimed in from the top bunk. "Are you going to beat them?" I thought about my grandfather's stories of fighting claim jumpers who tried to steal his land through legal tricks and intimidation. He'd won by being tougher and smarter than the bullies, not by being nicer. "Yes," I said simply, "I'm going to beat them." December 14th brought the final intimidation attempt. Motorcycles circled our property from midnight until 3 a.m., revving engines and laying rubber on our access road. Anonymous death threats filled our voicemail. Someone spray-painted "sell or else" on our main sign. The sheriff's station assigned a permanent patrol car to our property, but I wasn't scared anymore. I'd been in real danger before in places where people shot back. A bunch of suburban wannabe tough guys on motorcycles didn't even register on my threat assessment scale. Besides, their desperation was showing. People who are winning don't resort to death threats and midnight motorcycle parades. They were terrified of tomorrow's meeting, and their fear was making them stupid. I spent that final evening with my family at the resort, ignoring the ringing phone and watching the sunset paint the lake in colors that had looked the same when my grandfather first saw this place. The moonlight on the water was timeless, but everything else was about to change. December 15th dawned clear and cold. Perfect weather for a reckoning. I arrived at the community center at sunrise to set up presentation equipment, and the parking lot was already half full. People had driven from 3 counties to witness this showdown. Media trucks lined the street like an election night broadcast. As I tested the microphone and loaded my evidence slides, I felt the calm that comes before decisive action. My grandfather's worn work gloves sat in my jacket pocket for luck hands that had built something lasting with honest labor. The war was over. Time to collect the victory. ES arrived like Judgment Day. The community center was packed beyond fire marshal recommendations, with people standing 3 deep along the walls and spilling into the hallway. 3 TV crews had claimed. The front corner, their cameras aimed like artillery at the board table, where Delilah sat rigid as a marble statue. Morton fidgeted beside her, sweat beading on his forehead despite the December chill. I walked down the center aisle carrying my laptop and a manila folder that had become famous statewide, feeling 400 pairs of eyes tracking my movement. The silence was so complete you could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Delilah tried to control the meeting before it started, her voice sharp with manufactured authority. "Due to capacity concerns and safety considerations, we'll limit public comment to 5 minutes total." Jenny's objection cut through the air like a blade. State law requires reasonable opportunity for public input on budget matters. You cannot limit legitimate participation. Sheriff Deputy Bradley stationed prominently near the podium, not at his confirmation. "Legal requirement, ma'am. Full hearing or no meeting at all." Delilah's first defeat, and we hadn't even started yet. I connected my laptop to the projection system with the calm precision of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. The first slide appeared on the wall behind me. Pine Haven HOA Financial Analysis 2019 to 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the packed room, I'm here to discuss our association's finances. What you're about to see will shock you. Second slide. Total collected from all property owners, 2.1 million total spent. 3,000,023. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd. Morton's face had gone from red to pale green. Third slide. Reserve fund legal requirement $800,000, actual balance $23,000. A woman in the third row shouted, "Where's the money?" Others took up the cry until Deputy Bradley raised his hand for quiet. Fourth slide. Management company overcharges $400,000 over 4 years. The room erupted. People were standing, pointing at the board table, voices rising in anger. But I wasn't done. Now, let's talk about where your money really went. The personal enrichment evidence hit like a bomb. Delilah's $75,000 landscaping, Morton's $35,000 snow removal equipment, board members' luxury resort conferences in Hawaii and the Bahamas. But the smoking gun was the audio recording. I have one final piece of evidence, I announced, my voice cutting through the crowd noise like a church bell. This recording was made at a private board meeting last month. Morton's voice filled the room through the sound system. Once we own that resort, we're sitting on a $2 million gold mine. These hillbillies don't understand property values. It's almost charity work, really. The silence was deafening. Then Delilah's voice dripping with contempt. The Pine Haven acquisition is just the beginning. We'll force out every pre-existing property and rebuild this entire area properly. Mountain living for people who actually deserve it. The explosion of outrage shook the building. People were on their feet shouting, pointing fingers. A retired teacher named Mrs. Henderson yelled, "You called us hillbillies!" Someone else shouted, "Thieves!" Morton bolted for the exit like a rabbit, spotting a hawk, but Deputy Bradley's partner was stationed at the door. No escape today. Delilah tried desperately to regain control. These are accounting errors, misunderstandings. "Ma'am," I interrupted, projecting bank records onto the wall. "These are your signatures on fraudulent expense reports, your nephew's management company, your personal benefits paid with community funds." The room laughed, actually laughed at her obvious lies. The sound was brutal, dismissive, final. The votes came swift as summer lightning. Motion to remove the entire board, 43 in favor, 4 opposed, with the board members themselves abstaining out of shame or legal advice. Motion to terminate the management company, 45 in favor, 2 opposed. Motion to hire an independent auditor, unanimous. Motion to pursue criminal charges, 44 in favor, 3 abstentions. Motion to elect Rex Hartwell as interim board president. Acclamation so loud it rattled windows. That's when the handcuffs came out. Sheriff deputies approached the board table with arrest warrants as Deputy Bradley read charges. Delilah Thornfield. Morton Thornfield. You're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. Delilah's perfect composure finally cracked as the metal bracelets clicked around her wrists. This is a mistake. I'm an attorney. I know my rights. Yes, ma'am, Deputy Bradley replied calmly. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters surrounded me as the board. Members were led away, cameras flashing like lightning strikes. How does it feel to expose this corruption? Channel 9's reporter asked. This was never about revenge, I replied, keeping my voice steady and measured. This was about accountability, about protecting our community from predators who thought they could steal with impunity. As Delilah was led past in handcuffs, she refused to make eye contact. The woman who'd terrorized our family for months looked small, defeated, ordinary, just another criminal caught by their own greed. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause as the meeting officially adjourned. People surrounded me, offering congratulations, shaking hands, patting my back. Sarah appeared at my side, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, vindication, and pride. A local restaurant owner announced free dinner for everyone who'd attended. Children asked for my autograph like I was some kind of hero, though I felt more like a man who'd simply done what needed doing. As the community center emptied and the media packed their equipment, I stood alone for a moment in the space where justice had finally been served. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows felt warm on my face, like approval from somewhere beyond. My grandfather would have been proud, not just of the victory, but of how we'd won it with truth, preparation, and the courage to stand up when it mattered most. The aftermath unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion, each piece of justice clicking into place with satisfying precision. Criminal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Faced with overwhelming evidence and zero public sympathy, Delilah pleaded guilty to avoid federal racketeering charges. Years in state prison, plus full restitution, Morton flipped on his co-conspirators to save his own skin, earning 18 months and a permanent ban from HOA leadership. The management company owner got indicted in a federal corruption case that spread across 4 states. Turned out our little mountain drama was part of a much bigger criminal enterprise. But the real victory was financial recovery that exceeded our wildest hopes. Court-ordered restitution totaled $1.2 million, money that came flooding back to property owners who'd been systematically robbed for years. Each family received an average refund of $18,000. Sarah cried when the check arrived, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of financial security returning to our lives. Our legal fees got covered by recovered funds. The insurance settlement for the arson finally came through, letting us rebuild the maintenance shed better than before. For the first time in decades, Pine Haven Cabin Resort was completely debt-free. The community transformation felt like watching a neighborhood heal from a long illness. We elected a new HOA board from across the community. Not just Thornfield Estates, but representatives from every property. Monthly dues dropped from $400 to $200 after we hired an honest local management company at 40% of the previous cost. I voluntarily stepped down as board president once the reforms were implemented. I'm a resort owner, not a politician, and I'd accomplished what I set out to do: clean house and restore accountability. Personal healing came slower but deeper than the financial recovery. Sarah's stress-related health problems disappeared almost overnight once the harassment stopped. Our twin boys wrote an award-winning school essay about standing up to bullies that got published in the regional newspaper. We took our first real vacation in 2 years, a week at the beach, where nobody tried to sue us, burn our property, or question our right to exist. My marriage emerged stronger than ever. Nothing tests a relationship like sustained crisis, and Sarah and I had passed that test with flying colors. But the ripple effects reached far beyond our little mountain community. My phone started ringing with calls from HOA victims across 12 states, people facing similar harassment campaigns, property seizure schemes, and financial fraud. I began consulting pro bono, sharing the strategies and legal knowledge that had saved our resort. The state legislature invited me to testify about HOA reform legislation. The Pine Haven Act now requires annual financial audits, transparency in all HOA dealings, and criminal penalties for board member self-dealing. Other states introduced similar laws. I never expected to become a whistleblower, but sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things to protect what matters. Pine Haven Resort experienced a revival that surprised everyone, including me. Bookings increased 40% due to positive media attention. The resort that fought city. HOA became our unofficial marketing slogan, attracting guests who wanted to support the little guy who'd beaten the system. We added new amenities funded by the insurance settlement and recovered finances. The county designated my grandfather's original lodge as a historical landmark, ensuring it can never be demolished for condos. There's now an 18-month waiting list for summer reservations. But the initiative I'm most proud of came from using part of our restitution money to establish the Pine Haven Community Fund. We provide college scholarships for local students, small business loans for entrepreneurs, and funding for an annual Accountability Day festival celebrating government transparency. We also partnered with a regional environmental group to create a permanent conservation easement protecting the lake ecosystem. No matter who owns this property in the future, it can never be overdeveloped. The technical knowledge I gained fighting this corruption could fill a book. Every HOA member in America should demand independent financial audits every 2 years, not board-controlled reviews. Monthly statements should show actual versus required reserve balances. When hiring management companies, get 3 competitive bids and check references carefully. Avoid any family connections to board members. Most importantly, establish board term limits to prevent the kind of entrenchment that breeds corruption. Our story became a case study taught in real estate law classes and featured in a documentary called When Neighborhoods Turn Toxic. The National HOA Reform Movement cites our victory as proof that organized communities can defeat organized crime. Months after the budget meeting, I received a letter from an Oregon farming family facing identical tactics. They're trying to foreclose on our property using the same playbook. Sarah found me reading it at the kitchen table. Road trip? She asked with a smile that told me she already knew my answer. Because here's what I learned from this whole nightmare. Bullies only win when good people stay silent. They count on your fear, your isolation, your assumption that you can't fight back against people with money and power. But they're wrong. When ordinary citizens organize, document everything, and refuse to back down, justice usually wins. It's not easy, it's not quick, and it's definitely not fun, but it works. So, if you're dealing with HOA corruption, remember, you're not alone, you're not powerless, and you don't have to take it. Document everything. Build alliances. Show up to meetings. Vote in elections. And when they threaten you, don't get scared. Get organized. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Let's see how far this epidemic has spread. And more importantly, let's help each other fight back. Hit that subscribe button for more David versus Goliath justice stories, because there are a lot more battles to fight and a lot more bullies who need to learn that their time is up. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know. I want to see our community of accountability spreading across the map. Remember, they count on your silence. Don't give them that power. Thanks for being here with us at HOA Stories. If you enjoyed today's showdown and seeing an HOA Karen get put in her place, click like, sound off in the comments, and subscribe to catch the next week's drama. You don't want to miss it.